pad's going 2.5x now. Seems a little big, but I get it. We're all 40 effective now. He wants to keep putting pressure on us to like potentially put stacks in by the river. So raising a little bit bigger preflop is a good way to leverage that pressure across multiple streets. Half pot on the ace high board could very well be a range bet or like close to it. I don't want to make any extreme timing reads, but it does seem a little unlikely to me that like pocket queens types hands would just smash out the half pot on instinct. Something like 9x or 7x, though, I'm not ruling out. Which I think becomes relevant here. If I remember pad's triples, it is kind of interesting. So when I don't lead the turn, which like I have to think about whether I would be leading turn or not when I make trips. Like if I was thinking about this spot the same way I'm thinking about it now, it's that half pot contains all the 9x. For in position, I'm not playing the big blind particularly loose against a 2.5x, so I don't have like a whole ton of offsuit nines or anything. So I do think that I would play this type of situation mostly as check, or maybe just as pure check on the turn. The whole like turn leading thing small doesn't make as much sense on an ace high board as it does on other boards, because when I have an ace, there's just no reason for me to lead small. I don't want to protect. And when I have a 7, it's just like too weak of a hand to lead for protection. So I do think that I would mostly be checking turn. I was kind of relying on that when deciding what to do in this hand. I do think that pads is capable of finding, like, this is one of those river cards where everything gets there, quote unquote. But in reality, a lot of the bluffs that he's going to take this line with did not get there. A lot of the bluffs that he's going to take this line with are like king 6, king 10, maybe. King 10 probably checks the turn. But like some kind of high-low suited, if there are any high-low offsuits in his opening range that don't connect here, I'm not so sure. I don't know if he had like king 8, if he would follow that through on the river, or if he would just check. King 8 can definitely be good sometimes for at least half the pot. But yeah, I mean, I gave this one some thought because I do think pads is someone who like finds a reasonable number of the turn bluffs and then follows through this type of river quite liberally. But my hand is just like, in the context of my range, assuming that I'm playing my range the way that I want to, it's just quite a bad hand. So pads does correct this sizing. I say correct as, you know, as if it was for sure a mistake. It just seems to me like nothing's really changed in the last two hands, and now he drops to 2.2. It seems to me that it was maybe left over from a previous situation and wasn't updated for whatever reason. I don't know if he's using like a table ninja type of thing or what have you. So I flat ace-9 suited, certainly too thin to 3-bet pre-flop for value. Definitely just want to call. And on the flop, you know, it's not crazy to just fast play. It's a lot of big blinds to get in with a bare flush draw. If I had like king jack of clubs or even like ace jack of clubs, I would think about fast playing and just getting it in with lots of equity. I think it's nice to be able to deny some like weak pairs their equity as well. But with ace-9, I just decided to take kind of the bluff catching route, and pads goes pretty big here. So I mean, I'm not folding this good of a hand. I can fold some flush draws here. I'm not folding this flush draw. So the question is, do I want to jam or do I want to call? I think primarily my range wants to call. Like if pads is sort of claiming to be able to beat, let's say like a queen here, or a decent queen anyways. So I think that jamming a hand like, let's say, queen jack or king queen for protection would be a mistake. I think I just end up running into kings and losing, or running into ace queen and losing, running into 10-6 suited and losing. So I don't want to jam too often. Although I do think that playing a small jam percentage is reasonable. I think I just would have done it with like something weaker, like something that doesn't have this kind of showdown ability. Actually ends up working out that I flatted because I beat a weaker ace high that was kind of semi-bluffing the turn. I think I would have preferred to see myself overbet the turn on average, but I have a feeling I just rolled for it. I think I remember this hand now that I'm seeing it back. I think I recognized on the turn that this is actually a funny hand. I think I recognized on the turn that similar to the other paired board, I would be mixing between a small bet for like protection with my weaker pairs and an overbet with my trips plus. So I think I randomized to see how often I should use the small size with my trips. It ends up working out here because I get to the river in a spot where any full house is good enough to just screenshotting it. Pads and I were going at it a little bit on Twitter in a friendly conversation as we played this heads up. So I was taking some screenshots to share later on Twitter. But yeah, this ends up working out well because I think my sizing here is actually very consistent with a 7. And I think that Pads recognizes that because here he ends up I know what he had here. He had a 10. He checked behind flop with a weak 10, gets to river and goes for a pretty sizable raise with that. I was thinking this line certainly looks to me like aces or kings if it's value, because it's a very common overpair to check on these flops. But he ends up leaving that like 12 big blinds behind, which is, I mean, a play that I'm not generally crazy about doing because it leaves us in a very uncomfortable and vulnerable position here, where we have to make decisions for that last 12 bigs. Now, I don't think that's a strong argument against using this sizing. If it's the best size, it's the best size. And he's trying to just get called by a 7, so I could see why going all in would feel too thin. Perhaps going smaller was better. But either way, obviously I jam. I have 4 of a kind. So he tanks for quite some time, and I think I will just fast forward a bit so that you don't have to watch him tank. But I believe he takes quite some time before folding that one. And it was a nice fold.
So we start here with me calling a 3x raise on the big blind from the small blind. This is clearly mixed between 3-bet and call. This time we get called. I go ahead and bet half pot here with my decent draw, and he check raises. You could make the argument that you could 3-bet this combo. It's probably strong enough to 3-bet. Flat is considered standard in this situation. That's what I default to. And then on the deuce, I decided to check this hand because oftentimes on this type of board texture, people will get tricky with their sets, and I really don't want to get blown off this region or have to make a marginal call for stacks. With the 10, with the top pair and the flush draw, I'm probably stuck calling, but traditionally this has not gone that well for me. And so rather than put myself in a situation where my opponent could essentially bluff me off my hand or force me to make a large mistake with this region, I just choose to check back. You're going to see in Pio, of course, this is going to be bet fractionally because it's got too high equity for it to be a pure check in Pio land. It's obviously doing quite well against his range and has a lot of decent properties for a bet, but my personal preference here is to play these a little bit slower in these situations because I don't want to make a big mistake. And really the biggest mistake I can make here is paying off $400 on the turn against a set. So I'm really trying to minimize the worst case outcomes here by checking. And I get the 3 and he jams, and maybe I didn't manage to pull off the worst case outcome. Right now, he's really repping fairly slim. It doesn't... He could have 8s, he could have 4s, he could have some random ace-5, 6-5 combo the backdoor, but they're not very likely at this point, and I'm not convinced he wouldn't try to maybe induce a bluff at some point here on this type of board texture with those hands and try to check raise them sometimes. And since my hands, I think, reasonably under-repped at this point, like he probably feels very, very comfortable at this point in time. I don't have 2-pair plus unless I hit exactly 6-5, that, you know, or 10-3, or I guess some 8-3 combos. There's some weird suited combos of 2-pair, but it's a very small region. And so this is actually a reasonable spot to apply a lot of heat on a range, because I'm going to have to make calls with 1 pair. And I think the Queen of Spades here is actually a positive with this hand, because he's going to barrel a lot of spades on his turn. And given my under-up nature and the fact that he's applying way too much heat to a range that's reasonably capped, and this is a kind of a common leak at 5 NL is to value bet smaller when you think your opponent's weaker. Putting all that together, I went ahead and I made the call. He ends up with Jack-7 of hearts, which I guess he was planning on double check raising. I must admit this is really fairly non-standard with this hand. It's not, I don't think it's high enough equity here to go for the double check raise, but he certainly felt like it was, and it's certainly close. Like if he had Jack-9 of hearts, it would never really be bad here to double check raise. But Jack-9 and Jack-7 have substantially different equities here, because Jack-9 has an extra 3 outs, and so plus 7% on $1,000 is $70. And so Jack-7 of hearts here is a substantially worse check raise, because you have to risk $70 more to do it. And I think on this river he just figured that I had a reasonably capped range, and that he could get away with maybe a loose-ish bluff in this situation. The reason why it's loose-ish is he actually counterfeits a lot of the hands. I'm just gonna check fold here. Like if I did have 9-7 and I check back, it's gonna pure fold river. If I had something like Jack-8 of hearts here, he probably gets a fold most of the time. Jack-9, he probably gets a fold always. So essentially, like, this particular combo interacts a lot with the check fold range here. So I think he actually makes a fairly decent sized mistake with this hand. So here we get another drag raise, small bet flop, which, I mean, I think this board texture tends upward, but 1/3 on these boards has been effective. And lots of players here don't adjust much, so like if you bet 1/3 or 1/2, you get called with basically the exact same range. Here with my pair plus flush draw, I think easy call on turn. And then this kind of rolls back to 2 ideas here. One is, apparently these players really hate losing to pairs, because conceivably I could still have a 9-8 combo here, or a 5-6, or a Jack-8 of diamonds combo. I could have a Queen-Jack combo that called turn based on the lower sizing. So, even though they're not pure frequency, they do exist. And so basically, this bet is modeled against +3 big blinds. Database analysis says that +3 big blinds is roughly, it's very, very seldom most bluffs exceed +3 big blinds in these situations. So realistically, you could just check ace queen here. You don't have to bet the hand that, beats every single random call that's unpaired. But instead, you see him just kind of lob in this giant bet, and I take advantage of a couple effects here with the call. One is that if you actually look at this, the minimum value bet here isn't really ace, is something like ace king. And truthfully, that might be a little bit spicy here. Depends really heavily on my check raise frequency on turn. Because King 7 and King 10 exist in this range. So you're basically saying all those hands have been check raised off. And then the other idea, which you'll see here repeated multiple times on Run It Once and in most other coaching sites, all of them, every Twitch stream, every venue that people watch each other play online poker, basically, is you do not bluff diamonds here. Well, that leads us down this path where if I have 2 diamonds, his bluffing frequency is actually substantially higher than any other combo in my range because I don't block any bluff in this situation. I take out a little bit of value. And so if I don't block any bluff and I take out a little bit of value and the frequencies are reasonably close, this ends up being actually the prime target combo to call. And if you look through your sims and you look through your Pio sims and you look at basically how Pio chooses to bluff here, he always bluffs sometimes with diamonds, sometimes with something, because he doesn't like creating these little bumps in these situations where having diamonds in these spots is going to cause you to make extra money, because Pio's whole job here is to make every single hand 0 value outside of 2 pair against this sizing. And that is a much more difficult job than just picking, I guess, every hand that's worse than a pair as a bluff on this river that doesn't have diamonds. So you don't have diamonds, you don't have a pair, you bluff. You've created a completely different range than Pio, and it actually opens up a lot of exploitation in these situations. So you see me, actually, I called that thing very, very quickly because this is the textbook board for someone to basically over bluff at that sizing. He has a lot of pressure to bluff every Jack 8, every Queen 9, every Jack 9, every 9 8, every 5 6, every Queen Jack, apparently every ace queen, every ace jack. So you put that all together, it just there's essentially no way he can balance this in any meaningful way without being very conservative with his bluffing choices.
Alright guys, we're here with the last video of the series, the $5,000 buy-in WSOP Main Event 2021 online edition from GG. In front of you, you have the final table and the payouts down on the right side. We can see first place is 2.5 million. Next hand is this ace jack off, where, yeah, I think my approach was a bit too passive here. So the chip leader opens and he's from Brazil. He has all the chips and he opens the small blind here. And in game, I felt like this was too many chips to shove. I have like 32 bigs. But I think it's not really. I think it's just, like, in game it felt kind of close between all in or call. I wasn't really considering 3-bet calling, but looking at it now, I think that would be a reasonable approach as well. But today I would just shove this, and we can have a look at a sim. So yeah, you can see like small blind here with 75. He's like open shoving, like 5-4 suited, and a bunch of stuff here, right? He's open shoving king 4 off, ace deuce off. Not really open shoving that many good hands. He's open shoving like 4s, 3s, and deuces. Those are like the strong hands, and then he has just like infinite suited stuff that he's shoving. But he's also opening really wide, right? We can see that he's V-pipping 100 and just raising a bunch of trash. And I don't think this is going to be too far away from the strategy that this Edson guy was playing here. I think this is pretty accurate in terms of his strategy. So we can have a look at our response versus this. Yeah, we can see here that when he's this out of line, we get to be pretty wide as well with what we're shoving. So we're actually shoving ace 9 off here, which, looking at his range, it's not that surprising, I guess. But yeah, I guess these hands are a bit more surprising, like the jack 9 off, jack 10 off, queen 10 off. But anyways, we can see that our ace jack off is just, yeah, really, really pure, easy shove here. We can have a look at the EV tab as well. Yeah, quite a lot higher EV than calling. So probably a bit of a mistake there, just flatting. So I think I would prefer to see myself shoving. As the hand went on, I call. And then he bets small on the flop, like 30% or whatever. I think we have like very easy call. I think his range is so wide and he's going to see bet probably, if not range, he's c-betting a lot, right? So we call. I don't think there's much reason to do anything else with this hand. Turn, same. I think like checking is really the only option here. I don't really see betting accomplishing much. And same goes for the river. kind of surprised he doesn't bluff the river. He can't bluff all his unpaired hands, of course. I guess he doesn't really want to have the 10 in terms of blocking some of my gutters on the flop that might fold river. Guess 10 is kind of bad, but yeah, maybe randomized, I don't know. Seems like should probably bluff this one a reasonable amount, I would say. But yeah, have to take it down. I have 20 bigs here. And I go for the 3-bet induce, which I think is good. I think in general, you're supposed... I think maybe my size is too big. That's the problem that I have with this hand. Like, in general, in ICM, people tend to play too much jamming. And they don't induce enough, and they don't bluff enough of these super shallow stacks, I would say. It's very rare in ICM, like pocket aces, basically just never jams. You just click it till you're empty, basically, right? And pocket kings as well, to some extent, but pocket aces, if you have 6, 7 bigs, you're not open shoving aces usually, right? You're just min raising, and then you just flick in a few bluffs with that as well. Same with 3-betting. If you have 15 bigs, you can 3-bet off 15 bigs. You can easily just make it 4.3 bigs or whatever with aces. And the solvers are doing this. Humans are not doing it enough yet. And I think this is a pretty clear induce to me. Especially since I'm the shortest stack, it seems even clearer. But I think the problem here is my sizing. Because when you're doing this, your range is so polar, right? You have the super nuts or you have a bluff. And when that's the case, you don't really need to size up that much. So I go for this. And Nikita 4-bet shoves. GL indeed. Good flop, bad turn, and unfortunately, alas, bad river.
Hi, this is Richard Grieco for runitonce.com, and this is going to be a one-off live play session where I play and analyze in real time. This is just kind of whatever. I can open, I can limp with short time banks. I don't want to spend too much time on it. And this is well connected enough for Jack 10-9 to raise call. Heavy c-bet here with the ace 10-9-7, but my hand doesn't really fit the profile. And slow playing pretty much always. Good delay c-bet though. It's a good delay c-bet card on the right for my range. Happy to limp call nut suit with reasonable connectivity. Make 2 pair, don't need to bluff the river here. I'll call with backdoor nut flush draw. With spades, you can make an argument for checking back, maybe, but I think I just have, in general, too much equity for that. So we're going to go super small, basically. Obviously, happy to call it off. And river full house over here. I'm going to go with check back. You can also play range bet. He has more polarity, and obviously, honestly, I didn't notice his stack. Otherwise, I would have just got it in on turn. Somehow try and get 7s to show down and probably never win, but just don't have a really good bluffing hand. Could have bet flop, but I think check is also fine. Could have delay stab turn, but by that point I think check is probably best. This is a pretty good texture for me actually, against, again, a sort of quote-unquote normal. So what I'm going to do here is just check these combos with spades in them. The adventurous guy in me wants to cold 4 on the top right, but should generally be a little nittier in these situations in reality than in Solverland. Gonna keep barreling. I don't think I just almost ever get check raised. I'm just growing the pot for when I river the absolute nuts. decent chance he has the absolute nuts as well. And indeed he does. I think the cold call pre is on the loose side. I also think he probably wants to check everything on river, but whatever. I think you start to flat more of the marginal ace-ace combos as you get deeper, but the nut suits, I think, are still fine to go in the betting range. Could go either way here with the jack. The jack is doing some useful things. And had I known I'd face this stab size, I would have been more tempted to bet the hand, I think. Because now I have to fold, and I could have called versus like a smaller size, basically. Peel versus third, top left. Call versus fold versus half, I think. The pocket pair might swing it just enough. Hands a reasonable one top right, and just stick it for now. Normally my sizing for stabbing is B40, but I just don't have it in this setup and it doesn't matter a great deal. Yeah, there's a lot of aggression here that I haven't played it for a while, but
when you're playing over 500 bigs deep, you really need to be able to make some huge folds, or it's going to be hard to have a winning year. Big Bird's +1. He opens jacks to 30. Steve flats hijack with 5s. I'm in the cutoff with aces, 175. These guys just are not folding to 3-bets at all, so I'm using huge sizes that I would not use in tougher games with shallower stacks. I get 2 calls, and we go heads up to a flop that can be troubling. King, Jack, 4, 2 hearts. I've got black aces here. Check, check. 1/3 has to be the play all day with aces, ace, king, probably king, queen even, and of course, king, jack suited, jack, jack, and queen 10 suited, nut flush draw. Probably even queen, jack of hearts, jack 10 of hearts, jack 9 of hearts, if it's in there. Big Bird just calls. So that's his first mistake. You need to either front load your value hands here, or you need to check call with all of them on the turn to let me barrel off, because the turn check raise range is way too hard to balance. So I follow through 2/3 here. I'm trying to get called by slow played ace king. It's not always going to be 4-bet, especially ace king offsuit when we're so deep. Then he for sure has all combos of king queen. He for sure has king 10 suited. I think he could potentially call another barrel with ace jack, queen jack suited, jack 10 suited, jack 9 suited, all the heart draws, and queen 10 suited, of course. So he check raises 1800. We're playing super deep. I snap fold. Why? It's because he probably has all 9 combos of king jack offsuit instead of just 2 combos of king jack suited. And then he's also going to have all 3 combos of bottom set there. And he's probably not 4-betting jacks, which is reasonable since we're so deep. So that's either going into the flop check raise range or the turn check raise range, right? And to balance that out, he has to deliberately check call with Jack X of hearts or Queen 10 of hearts, or he has to take 7X of hearts and check raise huge on the turn. And all of those hands probably have to call off if they get jammed on. If they run into King Jack suited in my range, or Jack Jack, or possibly King King, or a stubborn aces or a stubborn ace king, those combo draws would have to call off. And I think probably less than 3% of the player pool is ready to stick in 500 bigs with a hand like that. They generally check call flop, check call turn, or they check raise flop. The turn check raise line is very, very, very under bluff there, and that's why my cards hit the muck instantly. Okay, I've got some numbers to hammer this home. Pot odds. Risk divided by risk plus reward equals minimum equity needed. Everybody knows that, but nobody does it on paper anymore because we rely too much on the solver. So if I call his turn raise, I'm risking 1,200 to win 18 plus 18 plus 9, so I would need 27% equity. But we have chips left to play with on the river. He started the turn action with $5,050. So if I assume he's always going to jam the river, I am risking an additional $4,450 to win $5,050 times 2 plus 900. So I would need a little over 40% equity to continue. So that's getting us closer to the number that we need, which is somewhere between this number and that number, assuming that we are ignoring implied odds and the possibility that I could call turn and have some fold equity on the river if a bad river comes off, like I'm trying to bluff him off 2 pair or a set, which seems kind of crazy. And this is also ignoring the possibility of me calling turn and correctly folding the river, so it's not going to be as accurate as the solver, but it's practical. Basically, you want to estimate these things on the high end of this spectrum, so I'm thinking something like 35%. So let's go over to Flopzilla here. Let's say that he's just going to go full Bond villain mode on the turn and check raise me with every combo of King Jack, middle set, bottom set, and every flush draw with a pair or an open-ender or a gutter. At that point, I have enough equity to continue, but this number drops off very quickly if I start eliminating some of these combos. So let's just get rid of the nut flush draws because people like to check call with those. And then let's get rid of Jack X of hearts because people think they have some showdown value, and that's a reasonable assumption. So this is about the break-even point. If I get rid of, let's say, Queen 10 of hearts, that's the break-even point. Okay, so how many combos are we working with here of flush draws? You got to press the tab button on your keyboard. Flush draws, 10 combos. Okay, that's still super aggro. I have a very hard time believing that anybody is going to check raise that aggressively. And even if he is, and he's going to barrel off every river, I still am just about break even. Okay, and if I trim this up just a little bit more, and I say, maybe he's not calling this wide pre, maybe he doesn't have all of these one gappers in there, but we're still giving him credit for being able to find 6 combos of check raises. Like, how much is my profit margin? Not that much. It gets a little bit better if I'm able to fold on heart rivers. But really, it's not that thrilling. And I think most people just have none of these. It's only 2 parent sets, and that's why I got out of the way.
I want to review some hands from this past EPT Barcelona that I handpicked both for this video and just for myself to delve into and give some thought to. So without further ado, let's go over the first hand history. It's a blind versus blind spot from one of the first 25Ks, and it's against Sam Greenwood, our fellow Run It Once coach. So it folds to me in the small blind, and I decide to open ace-7 offsuit, about 27 big blinds deep. About the pre-flop decision, I will be doing both some limping and some raising with hands of this class. I do want to build a raising range, and hands like this perform pretty well. I don't mind going post-flop with a short SPR, whereas, of course, if it goes limp check and we're post-flop with SPR 8 or so, my hand won't play as well. Obviously, if I limp and I get raised, then my hand plays a little bit better, and I also have the option to shove. But in this instance, I decided to open, and against very good players in the big blind, I'll just randomize here. This is the beginning of the tournament. We're just playing for chips. There are not really any tournament longevity or future edge considerations. So that won't be impacting my strategy. So he calls from the big blind, and we get this flop where my hand is kind of in no man's land, I would say. But first, what I want to do is I want to think about my overall strategy for this sort of board. Of course, I'll be opening with a polar range, but if we think about how my opening range is constructed, I'm going to be raising some hands that are very good and that are overpairs to this board. But a lot of my bluffing range will actually contain a 9 or an 8 in it. Obviously, in this particular instance, I have a 7, but I will also be raising a lot of hands like Queen 9 off, Ace 8 off, King 8 off that actually connect quite well with this board. So my plan here is to overall be quite aggressive with my range. I think I get to bet big sometimes. I also get to bet small sometimes. But the general gist of this spot is that I want to be quite aggressive with my range, betting quite frequently. So I'll want to be betting this hand at some frequency as well. Of course, I get some benefit from generating immediate folds. There are some good turns for me. I can still navigate my way to a potential showdown if I were to get called. And this hand's too good to immediately check fold versus a flop bet, but it doesn't really play that great in the check call node. So I decide to bet. I think I skewed towards mostly betting small with this hand, just because if I were to bet big, I think my impression at the time was that it would just narrow his range down a little bit more than I've wanted to, and I'd have a more difficult time getting to showdown, and my equity retention wouldn't be as good. So I get called. The turn is the 3 of clubs, pairs the bottom card, brings a flush draw. It does create a possibility for trips, but those combos are going to be kind of few and far between. When I raise here, most of the 3x that he can show up here with are going to be suited. Yes, he can occasionally have a hand like Ace 3 off or maybe King 3 off. But generally speaking, this is not that bad of a turn for me. and there's not really any cause for concern about it improving his range too much or anything like that. He'll also be floating me very wide versus my small bet on the flop. So I thought about putting out another block bet here. And I think it would actually be okay with this hand. I think I would prefer to have the ace of clubs instead of the 7 of clubs in my hand in order to do that. But I don't think it would be the craziest thing ever to actually block bet again here and kind of get a free card, maybe just get a fold from a hand that might potentially bluff us. But in this particular instance, I decided to also check, I think, most of the time, and this particular time kind of fell into those most of the time situations. So I decided to check. He bet 1/3 pot. I think it's a close decision, and my hand should be kind of immediately indifferent, but I decide to continue this time. And on the 6 of diamonds river, I have no reason to have a leading range on this river, so I check. He jams, and I decide to call him down. So the logic behind the call down here is I thought that when I get to this node, I'll actually have quite a lot of unpaired hands in my range, especially after he uses the small bet on the turn. So we have to remember that I'm going to be very aggressive on the flop and just betting a variety of hands. And then I can't really check fold too large a part of my range versus the small turn bet. So I'll still have a lot of hands like Queen 10, Queen Jack, Ace Queen, Ace King, Ace 10, hands like that get to the river and are all, well, I shouldn't say all, but all the ace high hands should be roughly equal here. In terms of, I don't think he's betting any hands here that are in between Ace 7 and Ace King. So my thoughts were that the 7, it's pretty good. I obviously block 10-7, and I block 7-5, both of which are straights, so that's good. I have a useful blocker. I do, of course, also block some of his bluffs, which is not that appealing, but basically I decided that in order to hit my required defense frequency here, which against this particular player, I want to make sure that I do, I have to be calling some ace-high hands. And if I'm going to be calling some ace-high hands, having a 7 in my hand seemed like a pretty good card to have. And it's also a spot where I thought, the 7 of clubs specifically shouldn't be in his bluffing range all too often. Whereas, of course, if I'm instead choosing to call him down with something like Ace 10 of hearts or Ace Jack of hearts, those are the side cards that would be in his bluffing range more often. So we were wrong in this particular instance, and he rolled over Queen 9 of spades, so oops.
Turning double gut shots, you really need to mind your frequencies here. It's very, very, very easy to overbluff if you're using all of your gut shots and open enders. So here I have a double gut shot with a heart. So I'm using it at 75, but if I didn't have the heart, I'm reducing the frequency. This one will bet every time. So I am going with a 2/3, checking very often. This hand seems reasonable to use, though, half the time I was thinking. And turn here, I do just like betting. I'm going to size down a bit and then use my hand every time. This hand is just pushing a lot of equity here, blocking flushes. And not having any showdown just seems very good. I don't have Jack 10 offsuit to use instead. Yeah, I'm going to have to bluff this one sometimes. So sizing's going to be 2/3, and I guess just all in here. Yeah, I'm going to have some ace-x of diamonds here. I think I will... Honestly, I think jam, like before 75 here. I hate it, but I have to do it. I have so much value here. Oh, fuck. God, I don't want to upload that one to run it once. Yeah, this has to be fine. Like, what are my other bluffs? My ace-x of diamonds here. God, I want to minimize this table so hard. My ace-x of diamonds is now top pair. So what are my bluffs? This feels very good. Oh, man. My heart is racing. I don't think I've ever made a bigger bluff on river. How much is this? It's like 8.2k, yeah. Very embarrassing moment to be checking back the nuts. I can imagine that getting re-uploaded to YouTube somewhere.
I think I'm going to start with half pot here in this three-way situation. I think with the ace of hearts, I don't mind checking here because I'm blocking I'm blocking the hands I'm going to look to get called by, and I'm not blocking the nuts that I'm getting check raised and facing a big river bet is going to be pretty grim with top two here. So I think going for a check and then bet river lines will be quite nice in terms of getting value from some hero calls from like Jack King, picking off some bluffs from missed draws, and making sure that I get a call from, I might only get one street from weaker hands. And I think I just have a jam here. My shoving range here is going to be so polarized. I think the big blind's clearly got a tough decision here with King Queen by the fact they're tanking. I think full houses are going to be... Well, I don't think they have pocket fours in their range because that would check raise the flop. I don't think they have pocket tens pre-flop or on the flop for the same reason. So I think they've got King Queen here, or because I don't think ace ten's tanking. I think ace ten's just a snap call. Looks like that's a nice ace 10, yeah, pretty gross. Ace 10 just can't fold. I think King Queen can find folds there. Oh wow, we got a jackpot. I think they must have changed the jackpot rules. Oh wow, how cool is that for the video? Sick, 23 grand. Wow, that's really nice to get that one on video. How's your luck? I think they've changed the jackpot rules in terms of qualification, because ace 10, aces over 10s, I don't think qualified last time I looked. So that must have changed over the last few days, which is pretty nice for me. And yeah, wow, how nice is that? Wonder what happens if ace 10 found a fold there. That would be pretty criminal if they folded there not knowing the jackpot rules. Yeah, that's absolutely perfect to get that on camera. I think that's pretty cool.